Every blue wall state in a single day, campaigning alongside former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, warning disaffected Republicans and Trump's skeptical moderates that the fate of the election could be in their hands. Take a listen to how she laid it out at a Philadelphia event.
I've taken the oath of office 6 times. And for the elected leaders here, we know it is an oath that one must take sincerely and unequivocally. It is not about the individual. It is not about what is in their personal interest. It is about what is for and in the spirit of the public good. And this is a moment in this election that presents a real contrast among how I, as one of the 2 nominees, and my opponent, the former president, think of that duty.
It comes as the former president is leaning into strongman rhetoric, claiming in interviews that his political rivals, including prominent Democrats, are, quote, the enemy from within, and that he would consider using the military against them. The Harris campaign has seized on those comments as the former president doubles down on them, putting some of his most prominent supporters on the defensive as they try to rewrite Trump's comments.
One of the first things you did when you joined Congress was to create the Honor and Civility Caucus. Does wanting to use the military against political opponents, would that pass muster with the Civility Caucus?
No, that's not. Jake, you know that's not what he's talking about there. What he's talking about is marauding gangs of dangerous, violent people who are destroying public property. What President Trump is talking about is that they have been attacking and maligning him from the day he came down that golden escalator. Everybody knows that's true. Kamala Harris has used language saying he's so dangerous to the country. I mean, I've had colleagues in the House say he must be eliminated. He must be extinguished.
He's literally talking about
this stuff is over the top.
You know, against Democrats. I mean, he's literally talking.
No, he's not. No,
yes, he is.
No, he's not, Jake. No, he's not. No, he's talking about using the National Guard and the military to keep the peace in our streets.
Just a few hours after that interview, Mr. Trump explicitly called his political rivals, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the enemy from within.
That's an enemy from within. That is a threat to democracy. These are bad people. We have a lot of bad people. But when you look at Shifty Schiff and some of the others, yeah, they are, to me, the enemy from within. I think Nancy Pelosi is an enemy from within.
The former president also ramping up his incendiary rhetoric against Vice President Harris with personal attacks and profanity.
You have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. We can't stand you. You're a vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here.
Harris responded to those remarks in an interview with MSNBC's Al Sharpton.
What you see in my opponent, a former president of the United States, really is, it demeans the office. And I have said, and I'm very clear about this, Donald Trump should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. He has not earned the right. He's not earned the right. And that's why he's going to lose.
Former President Trump's incendiary rhetoric is just the tip of the spear of a campaign operation that is anything but conventional. On Saturday, he went off topic at a Pennsylvania rally with a crude remark about the anatomy of golf legend Arnold Palmer. Then on Sunday, he staged an appearance at a local McDonald's, pushing his claim that Harris is lying about working at the fast food restaurant when she was younger. And this afternoon in North Carolina, he again shared false accusations about the federal response to Hurricane Helene and FEMA spending. With all that, let's bring in our NBC News reporters following every angle on the campaign trail. Garrett Haake is with the Trump campaign in North Carolina. Julie Tsirkin is with the Harris campaign in Michigan. Jesse Kirsch is outside a polling place in South Florida where early voting is now underway. And Ryan Nobles is on the road in Texas as he chases both of the Senate candidates in a race Democrats are hoping turns competitive. We'll get to Texas, but first, Texas' favorite son, Garrett Haake, you are in North Carolina, and Trump's first stop, he repeated some of his false claims about the Hurricane Helene response and FEMA's own response to that. What did you hear?
Yeah, Allie, I think we heard sort of a a kaleidoscopic view of Trump's false claims about the hurricane response here, suggesting that the federal government wasn't doing enough, saying he doesn't know the governor here, that the governor wasn't doing enough, and promising to take over and do a better job if and when he's elected president. I will say on that portion, he was slightly more forward-looking than I have frankly heard from him in the past, when he's been even more conspiratorial about the hurricane response. But I have to tell you, just within the last few minutes at his second event, we've switched back to Trump's favorite conspiracy, which has been about vote counting, suggesting that he wants to have God come down and count the votes, that might change the results in places like California, and that who counts the votes is more important than who casts the votes. So we're getting a sort of a wide view of the various conspiracies available to the former president today.
Well, speaking of those conspiracies, and one of Trump's tried and true favorites, of course, around the 2020 election that he lost. But our colleague Vaughn Hilliard asked him today if he's seen cheating so far in this election, and he said no. So where does that leave him when he then tries to revive the claims later on?
Yeah, Allie, and I think this is such an important moment. We should probably play the clip of Vaughn putting Donald Trump on the record today that the process has been clean. Here's what the former president said.
Mr. President, since Chairman Whatley is here, have you, 2 weeks out from the election, have either of you seen any cheating, incidents of cheating, that leads you to believe that this election will not be fair?
Well, I haven't. Unfortunately, I know the other side, and they are not good. But I have not seen. Michael, have you seen anything that looks suspicious? We're very early in the process.
Yeah, we're very early in the process, and we're tracking across all 50 states right now to make sure that the systems that we want to have in place are in place, and we're very happy with the initial results.
So, Allie, a lot of caveats there about being very early in the process. And I think that makes sense given that the way Donald Trump talks about this election, including today, is that he cannot possibly lose unless the votes aren't counted fairly. Of course, that's not how this works. He'll lose if he has fewer votes cast in his name. But until the counting is done, there's no cheating to identify, at least in his view.
Well, we also mentioned this, some of the enemy from within comments that he's been making. Do those move the ball anymore? And I mean, Garrett, even just think about the conversation that you and I are having right now. We're talking about an election not being stolen because the elections in the United States are secure. We're talking about what he did, those off-color remarks that he made at that Pennsylvania rally. Do any of these comments have utility in actually persuading or turning out voters?
Allie, you know my view on this, as viewers of this show do, that there is very few, if any, people left in this country who are undecided about Donald Trump. I think most of them are undecided if they are still deciding about Kamala Harris, who's the lesser-known commodity at this stage. That said, if this is sort of the last thing kind of at the top of your mind when you're making that choice, these things could still change voters' minds around the edges. But I have a hard time imagining that if you weren't exposed to this kind of language by Donald Trump, on which he's been so consistent for the last 8 years, up until now, that you're suddenly waking up to say, I can't believe he's talking this way about Democrats and his political opponents. I just have a hard time believing that those voters out there have consciences left to be shocked by these commentary if they weren't already there.
Yeah, he's one of the best-known political brands in politics. I don't think anyone is just learning about Donald Trump. Garrett, Haake, thanks for joining us. On to Julie Tsirkin now. Kamala Harris has spent the day campaigning with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. I think that is still a fascinating split screen for those of us who covered Cheney on Capitol Hill. But what did you hear from them, and what does it tell you that the Harris campaign sees her time best spent 15 days out from Election Day campaigning with a former Republican?
It is such a fascinating dynamic, Allie. You're exactly right, because this is somebody who was a member of House Republican leadership. Afterwards, of course, she was kicked out from that role when she went on to have some very strong disagreements, very strong comments against the former president. Of course, then heading up that January 6th Select Committee investigating Trump's actions on January 6th that we all covered. And the purpose of having Cheney appear with Harris through this swing in these Rust Belt suburbs is to try and reaffirm to the very small sliver of undecided voters, perhaps Republicans who are anti-Trump, who don't want to vote for him but are unsure if Harris is maybe too progressive, too left-leaning. Cheney's role here at all of these events is to reaffirm them that she is a constitutional conservative, that her father, of course, served in the Bush administration, and even she and her father are supporting Harris for president, and of course talking about the very salient message that is resonating with these voters, that they believe that Trump is a threat to democracy.
Well, that is the central point that we've heard, of course, from Congresswoman Cheney, but also from Vice President Harris, she has continuously brought up Trump's fitness for office, both as a danger to the republic as well as his mental state. As you've been out there talking to voters, is that a message that resonates? Because to me, it sort of feels like Battle for the Soul of the Nation 2.0 with a very different messenger.
Yeah, absolutely. Allie, and Harris has kind of revived that message in the last couple of days after the former president canceled several media appearances. And Harris does think this is a popular message that will work with voters, work with her base and the people she's trying to get into her corner. And it's in part because this is a very effective line of attack that Trump used against Joe Biden, who was at the top of the ticket. The president, of course, he found talking about his mental fitness, talking about his age, worked with voters, worked with getting them to his side of the aisle. Well, now Harris can say, look, this is a 78-year-old, so put aside his age, but also look at what he's done in the last couple of years. His threats against democracy is something Harris is focusing on, talking about his mental fitness. Trump is paying attention, too. This is something that is getting under his skin. He posted on social media a couple of hours ago talking to that effect, calling Harris low IQ individual, flipping the script on her, or trying to. So certainly this is a message that is working for Harris and something that we are continuing to hear throughout her appearances with Cheney today.
Yeah, getting under Trump's skin has always been a feature, not a bug, of the Harris campaign strategy. Julie, quickly, the Harris administration is also going all out to court black men. What are they doing to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Barack Obama, the former president, is joining her on the campaign trail later this week in Georgia on Thursday. Since he was in office, we haven't seen that kind of turnout. Black men voting for Democrats, not Joe Biden. And certainly this is a demographic that Harris is worried about. And it comes as the former president is trying to cut into those margins, right? We saw recent polling come out, how the shift, especially black men under 50, more of them are thinking about voting for Trump than pretty much ever before, at least in modern history. And so this is something that Harris and her campaign are taking very seriously. Earlier this month, Allie, we saw her team release a strategy specifically focused on economic opportunities for that group of black men specifically. And of course, we saw that yesterday as well when she celebrated her 60th birthday in Georgia, speaking at a black church. We saw the pastor there talk to the voters there, say you have to support a woman for president, and essentially telling them to do just that on November 5th when they vote for Harris.
Birthdays on the campaign trail. I think we've all been there. Julie Tsirkin, thank you. Jesse Kirsch, you are in Miami-Dade County in Donald Trump's adopted home state where early voting is now underway. What are you hearing from voters in this previously Democratic stronghold county, but 2022 spelled all signs of trouble there?
Yeah, and that, of course, is something that Governor Ron DeSantis, Allie, loves to point to as one of his bona fides in terms of when he was running for president. The governor, though, some of his backed candidates in primary races here this spring did not fare so well. So, it's something to be seen when we talk about if Miami-Dade County itself is shifting. Certainly the state seems to be shifting to ruby red if it's not already firmly there from a state that used to be one of those key battlegrounds, right? We've been talking with voters here. There are a couple issues that are getting specific attention in Florida. There's a vote on recreational marijuana being approved. Here, there's also a vote on enshrining expanded abortion access in the state. This is one of 10 states with an abortion ballot measure up for a vote this fall. And of course, that is an issue that is being focused on by people all over the country. It's something we're wondering about how it could factor into the presidential race. So it has that much more attention potentially here in this state. I caught up with two voters earlier, one who is backing Vice President Harris, the other backing former President Trump. Here's part of what we heard from both of them. Is there anything about Kamala Harris that you specifically like that resonates with you, or is it more about voting against Trump than voting for Harris?
Definitely voting against Trump.
What draws you to vote for former President Trump? Why do you like his policies? And
President Trump is, I believe he's a true patriot. He may be a billionaire, but he's a true patriot, and I really believe that he loves the United States of America. And we want a leader. A lot of people criticize the way he talks and stuff. I don't care. I want a leader that is going to save this country.
And that voter also told me that she made a point of coming to vote early in person because she has some concerns, didn't point to anything specific, but had vague concerns about how elections are being carried out. And that just speaks to, Allie, something we hear all over the place. It continues to be one of the undercurrents of this election is the ramifications of all of the fraud allegations back in 2020. So, it's something that continues to be out there. And I can tell you that woman is one of more than 27,000 people who have voted early in person today on the first day of early in-person voting here in Miami-Dade County. Those are the unofficial numbers. We, of course, don't have any kind of results at this point, but as we love to say, the voters are voting. Allie.
We do love when the voters are voting in one of my favorite political states of Florida, where all of the things you say are right, and they might have implications on another Senate contest that's also on our radar. Jesse Kirsch, thanks for joining us. Ryan Nobles, you're in Texas, speaking of Senate contests, a state that has eluded Democrats down ballot for years now. They are hoping, though, that Colin Allred can make it a contest against Ted Cruz. So what's Allred's argument for why he's the one who's finally going to make it happen?
Well, the big thing he's trying to do, Allie, and it struck me when we spoke to him earlier today, is trying and separate himself from all this history that Texas Democrats have had. He doesn't want to run on the record of Texas Democrats or national Democrats for that matter. He's trying to make the case directly to Texans. It's Colin Allred who wants to represent you in Texas. He describes himself as a fourth-generation Texan, somebody that was a football star at Baylor, grew up just a few miles from the polling location that he voted at. He's not worried about the Democratic history in this state because he's trying to chart a new course. Listen to what he told me earlier.
Well, in a way, it's not really about that to me. This is a different question, which is who's better to serve us for the next 6 years, Ted Cruz or me? We've seen for 12 years how Senator Cruz has served, how he went to Cancun when we needed him most, how he tried to overturn the American presidential election, how he's singularly responsible for this abortion ban here in Texas. I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I'm the exact opposite. And so while we have a lot of history building up to this is a singular choice for Texans that's a little bit different from what we've had in the past.
And so you see what Colin Allred is attempting to do here, right? He wants this race to be about Ted Cruz. And while Republicans and Republican politics, Star State, Donald Trump should win here easily, Ted Cruz as an individual may not be that popular. So what the pitch that Colin Allred is making to these Texans is, I'm different than him. I'm different than the Texas Democrats. I'm different than the Democrats in Washington, D.C., and I'm certainly not Ted Cruz. So if you can just kind of deep connection that you have to the Republican Party and give me a chance, I'll try and be a different kind of senator for you. Allie, whether or not that's going to resonate here in Texas, I think is still something that remains to be seen because the operation here for Republicans is very strong and continues to get stronger. So Texas, they have a hope. Democrats have a hope, but almost everything has to go right in order for Colin Allred to be successful in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ryan. Everything would have to go right, but Democrats have been working the ground